There is a particular drawer in my study, the bottom right one in the heavy oak desk I have owned for 40 years, where I keep things I do not know what to do with but cannot bring myself to throw away. Yesterday afternoon, while the house was quiet and Eleanor was out visiting a neighbor, I opened that drawer looking for an old fountain pen. Instead, I found a small, spiral-bound notepad from 1998. It was one of the pads I used to carry in my jacket pocket when I worked in publishing. I sat in my chair and started flipping through the pages. Most of it was just meeting notes, phone numbers of printers in Chicago, and reminders to call authors. But near the back, I found a grocery list I had written out for a weekend trip to the supermarket. I read the items on that list one by one. Fat-free fruit yogurt, skim milk, 2 boxes of heart-healthy oat bran cereal, whole wheat pretzels, margarine, a large bottle of organic apple juice, low-fat granola bars. I stared at that list for a very long time. I felt a heavy sinking feeling in my chest, a profound sense of retrospective guilt. That list was not just a record of what I ate. It was a perfect, precise blueprint for cellular destruction, and I had been buying it, eating it, and feeding it to my family with the absolute certainty that I was doing the right thing. When I look back on my life and I try to measure the mistakes I have made, this is my biggest regret. It is not a financial mistake. It is not a career opportunity I missed. My deepest regret is the decades I spent blindly trusting the packaging on the food I consumed, believing that the bright, healthy-sounding labels were actually protecting me. I spent the prime years of my life, my 40s and 50s, actively feeding the very mechanisms in my body that lead to disease, rapid aging, and the uncontrolled cellular growth we call cancer. I did not do it out of carelessness. I did it because I was following the rules of the era. I was doing exactly what I was told. And the hardest part of getting older is realizing that the rules we were given were fundamentally broken. I grew up in Ohio in the 1950s. My father was a man of routine. He worked hard, he spoke quietly, and he ate the way people of his generation ate. He had eggs and bacon in the morning, a sandwich for lunch, and meat and potatoes for dinner. He did not snack. The concept of grazing throughout the day did not exist in our house. When he was hungry, he ate a meal. When he was not, the kitchen was closed. But by the time I was a professional raising my own children in the 80s and 90s, everything had changed. The narrative shifted. We were told that the food my father ate was dangerous, that the fats would clog our arteries and stop our hearts. We were handed a new playbook. We were told to avoid fat at all costs and to replace it with complex carbohydrates. We were told that eating 5 or 6 small meals a day was the secret to keeping our metabolism burning. I embraced that new playbook completely. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to be around for Rebecca and Daniel. So I changed everything. I threw away the butter and bought margarine. I stopped eating eggs and started eating massive bowls of fortified cereals with skim milk. And most importantly, I started snacking. I kept a box of whole wheat crackers in my desk drawer at the office. I had a low-fat granola bar in my briefcase. I drank glasses of fruit juice thinking I was getting essential vitamins. I thought I was a model of modern health. But what I was actually experiencing, looking back on it now, was a slow, steady physical decline that I completely misunderstood. Throughout my 50s, I was chronically exhausted. I would hit a wall of fatigue every afternoon around 3 o'clock that was so severe I could barely keep my eyes open during meetings. My joints ached, a dull, persistent throbbing in my knees and lower back that I simply chalked up to getting older. I started carrying weight around my middle that I could not lose, no matter how many miles I walked on the weekends. I was inflamed, I was tired, and my body was quietly sounding alarms that I did not know how to hear. I just kept eating my 6 small, healthy meals, completely unaware that I was laying the groundwork for a biological catastrophe. It was not until years later, long after I had retired, that the consequences of that lifestyle truly terrified me. When Eleanor faced her severe health crisis, it shattered the false sense of security I had built around us. Sitting in those waiting rooms, listening to doctors speak in hushed tones about cellular mutations and aggressive growths, I realized how incredibly fragile the human machine is. I realized that disease does not just fall out of the sky. It grows in the dark. It grows in environments that are prepared for it. That realization drove me to my study. I bought medical journals. I started reading about oncology, about cellular metabolism, about the actual mechanical reasons why our bodies betray us. What I found in those readings is the reason I am sitting here talking to you today. I had to unlearn everything I thought I knew about health. The first and most terrifying concept I had to grasp was the nature of cancer itself. I used to think of it as a foreign invader, but the reality I read about in those journals is far more unsettling. Cancer is not a virus you catch. It is your own biology turning against you. In a healthy, functioning body, cells are constantly dividing, dying, and being replaced. When a cell becomes damaged or mutated, your body has an elegant defense mechanism. The damaged cell recognizes that it is broken and initiates a process of self-destruction. It quietly takes itself apart so it does not harm the rest of the body. But sometimes a cell becomes damaged and loses that programming. It forgets how to die. It becomes rogue. And this is the critical point, the point that changed my entire understanding of diet and health. A rogue cell is incredibly vulnerable in its early stages. It is broken. Its internal machinery does not work properly. Specifically, its mitochondria, the little engines inside the cell that generate energy, are usually defective. A healthy cell uses oxygen to burn fuel cleanly and efficiently. But a rogue cell, a cell that has the potential to become a tumor, cannot do that. It relies on a primitive, inefficient process called fermentation to stay alive. When I first read about this process, I had to read the paragraph 4 times to make sure I was understanding it correctly. Because the rogue cell's engines are broken, it cannot use complex fats or oxygen for fuel. It can only use one thing. It can only ferment sugar. And because fermentation is such a terrible, inefficient way to create energy, that single rogue cell needs massive amounts of sugar just to survive. It becomes a microscopic glutton, pulling in 10 to 15 times more glucose than a normal healthy cell. It sits in your tissue, fragile and desperate, waiting for a supply of easily accessible sugar to wash through your bloodstream. I sat in my chair and thought about my grocery list from 1998. I thought about my bowl of heart-healthy cereal, which my body instantly broke down into pure glucose. I thought about the skim milk, stripped of its protective fats, leaving only the milk sugars. I thought about the organic apple juice, which was nothing more than liquid fructose. I thought about the low-fat granola bars, held together by corn syrup and refined carbohydrates. Every single thing I was putting into my mouth, multiple times a day, was the exact specific fuel that a rogue, mutating cell desperately needed to survive and multiply. I was not building health. I was operating a delivery service for cellular destruction. But the fuel is only part of the regret. The deeper regret, the one that still keeps me awake on certain nights, is understanding what I did with the timing of my meals. I mentioned that I had adopted the habit of grazing, eating 5 or 6 small meals a day. I thought I was keeping my metabolism active. What I was actually doing was far more dangerous. As I dug deeper into my notebooks, trying to understand how a single cell becomes a mass, I learned about the role of insulin. Most of us only think about insulin when we think about diabetes. We think it is just a hormone that regulates blood sugar. But the researchers described insulin in a completely different way. They described it as the master anabolic hormone of the human body. Anabolic means growth. When you eat a meal, especially a meal high in carbohydrates and sugars, your blood glucose rises. Your pancreas releases insulin to push that glucose into your cells. But insulin does not just move sugar. It broadcasts a loud, powerful chemical signal to every cell in your body. And that signal says one thing: grow, divide, multiply. I had to put my pencil down when I finally understood the implication of this. I realized that insulin is essentially a biological fertilizer. If you have a healthy body, that fertilizer helps maintain your muscles and your tissues. But if you have a microscopic rogue cell, a cell that refuses to die and is desperately trying to multiply, that insulin signal acts like pouring high-grade fertilizer directly onto a weed. It tells the tumor to grow faster. By eating my healthy breakfast, my mid-morning crackers, my low-fat sandwich, my afternoon pretzels, and my evening fruit, I was ensuring that my insulin levels never dropped. I was keeping the growth signal turned on from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to sleep. I was keeping the fertilizer flowing constantly. And because I was constantly eating, my body never had the opportunity to enter a state of repair. It was always in a state of storage and growth. I never gave my immune system the quiet, unfueled time it needed to patrol the tissues, locate the rogue cells, and eliminate them. I want to pause my thoughts here for a brief moment. Many of the people who find these videos and sit through these explanations are not actually subscribed to the channel. I was looking at the numbers with my son Daniel recently, and he pointed out how many of you watch regularly without being subscribed. If these conversations are helping you rethink your own habits, if they are providing value to you, please take a moment to click that subscribe button. It is a small action, but it helps ensure we can keep sitting down together like this without having to compromise the quiet nature of this channel. I truly appreciate it. When the reality of what I had done to my own body finally settled in, it was accompanied by a sharp, painful memory. I remembered packing lunches for Rebecca and Daniel when they were in middle school. I remembered putting those same low-fat granola bars, those same juice boxes, those same refined carbohydrate snacks into their bags. I did it because I loved them. I did it because the television commercials and the magazine articles told me it was the best way to care for them. The realization that I was actively feeding them the building blocks of chronic inflammation and metabolic dysfunction is a heavy burden to carry. It is my biggest regret, not just for myself, but for the choices I made for the people I was supposed to protect. But the beautiful, forgiving nature of human biology is that it is never entirely too late to change the environment. The research I was reading did not just explain how cancer grows. It also explained how to starve it. It explained how to create an internal environment that is incredibly hostile to disease. And the solution was not a new drug or an expensive supplement. The solution was an absolute rejection of the modern dietary narrative. The solution was returning to the biological rhythms that our bodies were actually designed for. I realized that if rogue cells require massive amounts of glucose to ferment, and if they require high levels of insulin to multiply, then the most logical, powerful defense I had was to drastically reduce both. I had to cut the fuel lines, and I had to stop spreading the fertilizer. The first thing I did was walk into my kitchen and begin throwing things away. Eleanor watched me with a look of mild concern as I filled a trash bag with the whole wheat crackers, the flavored oatmeals, the organic fruit juices, and every single box that proudly advertised itself as low-fat or heart-healthy. I told her I was done being fooled. I told her I could no longer look at those boxes as food. I could only see them as concentrated glucose. The transition was difficult. When your body is used to running on a constant drip of easily accessible sugar, taking it away causes a real physical withdrawal. For the first 2 weeks I had headaches. I felt irritable. I felt a deep, gnawing hunger in the middle of the afternoon that my body begged me to fix with a handful of pretzels. But I remembered the biology. I remembered the broken furnaces of the rogue cells. I pushed through the discomfort. I stopped grazing entirely. I went back to the way my father ate, the way generations of human beings ate before the food industry convinced us we needed to constantly feed our faces. I eat 2 meals a day now, sometimes 3 if I have been very active in the garden. But there is absolutely no food consumed between those meals. When I eat, my insulin rises naturally to process the food, and then it drops back down to a quiet baseline. For the vast majority of my day, the growth signal in my body is turned off. The fertilizer is locked away in the shed, and I completely changed what those meals consist of. I stopped fearing natural fats. I realized that healthy cells, the cells I want to keep, are perfectly capable of burning fat for energy. But rogue fermenting cells struggle immensely to use fat. So I started eating eggs again, cooked in real butter. I started eating avocados, olive oil, and fatty fish. I replaced the massive bowls of starchy grains with enormous piles of dark, bitter greens. I eat broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and spinach. I learned that these vegetables are not just low in sugar, They contain specific, powerful compounds that actively interfere with a tumor's ability to build the blood vessels it needs to survive. But the most profound change I made, the practice that has given me the greatest sense of peace and physical resilience in my late 70s, is the discipline of the fasting window. I talked earlier about how constant eating prevents the body from repairing itself. When you stop eating after dinner and you do not consume a single calorie until the next morning, your body undergoes a remarkable shift. When the incoming fuel stops, the insulin levels drop to their absolute lowest point. The body realizes it still needs energy to keep your heart beating and your lungs breathing while you sleep. So it turns inward. It activates the cellular cleanup process. It becomes a biological inspector, patrolling your tissues, looking for damaged proteins, senescent cells, and most importantly, those vulnerable, glucose-dependent rogue cells. Because there is no sugar in the bloodstream, the rogue cells begin to starve. Because there is no insulin, they cannot multiply. The healthy cells switch over to burning stored body fat for fuel, a clean, efficient process. But the broken cells, the ones that rely on fermentation, cannot make that switch. They are left isolated, starving, and unable to grow. By simply extending the time I spend not eating, I am giving my immune system the perfect, quiet environment it needs to hunt down the threats and eliminate them through natural apoptosis. It has been years since I made these changes. I am 77 years old, and I feel a structural integrity in my body that I honestly did not possess at 55. The chronic ache in my knees that I thought was permanent is gone. The afternoon exhaustion has been replaced by a calm, steady current of energy that lasts all day. My blood work shows incredibly low levels of fasting insulin and almost non-existent markers for inflammation. I am not telling you this to claim I have found a cure for anything. I am an old man sitting in a study, reading notebooks, trying to make sense of the time I have left. I know that aging is a complex process. I know that environmental toxins, genetics, and stress all play a role in how our bodies break down. There is no absolute shield against mortality. But I am telling you this because the regret of not knowing this sooner is a heavy thing to carry, and I do not want you to carry it if you do not have to. I look around the grocery stores today, and I see the exact same deception that caught me in the 90s. I see the aisles packed with highly processed, sugar-laden products disguised as health foods. I see parents buying these things for their children, believing they are doing the right thing, just like I did. The marketing has become more sophisticated, using words like plant-based and gluten-free, but the metabolic reality remains exactly the same. It is still concentrated glucose. It is still an insulin trigger. It is still the perfect environment for disease. You have to stop trusting the front of the package. You have to start protecting your own biology. You have to recognize that every time you eat a refined carbohydrate, every time you drink a glass of liquid fruit sugar, every time you snack on a processed bar to get you through the afternoon, you are making a choice about the environment inside your body. You are choosing to flood the system with fuel. You are choosing to turn on the growth signal. You do not have to live in fear of disease, but you must live with a profound respect for the mechanics of your own body. You have the power to change the environment. You have the power to shut off the fertilizer. You have the power to close the kitchen, embrace the quiet of the fast, and let your body do the miraculous work of cleaning and repairing itself. It is late afternoon now. The light in my study is starting to turn that deep golden color that happens just before evening. I am going to put this old grocery list back into the drawer and close it. I cannot undo the choices I made decades ago. I cannot take back the snacks I fed my children or the bowls of cereal I ate at my desk. But I can control what I put on my plate tonight. I can control the long, quiet fast that will follow my dinner. I can ensure that while I am sleeping, my body is healing, not growing the things that want to harm me. Tomorrow morning, when you open your pantry, I want you to look closely at the things you have been told are healthy. I want you to think about the broken furnaces and the biological fertilizer. I want you to make the choice that starves the disease and feeds your resilience. I hope you find the courage to throw away the things that are quietly working against you. I will see you next time.